Before you buy a house in the Treasure Valley area, you have to know about these 11 potential problems with buying a home here, so you can make sure that you look for them, you know about them. Some of these things are easily solvable, and others are sort of structural problems that you just can't get rid of no matter what you do. So before you buy that house here, make sure that you watch this video so you make sure you don't get screwed when you're buying a home here in the Boise, Idaho area. In this video, I'm gonna go over specifically what you're gonna find in resale homes. These are existing resale homes, meaning someone already lives in it. The house was built a number of years ago, and depending on the age of the home, there could be more and more potential problems. But again, there's gonna be some things that have nothing to do with the house itself. It has to do with what's coming with the property. But I'm also gonna tell you how you can solve some of these things easily, or in other cases, you may just wanna move on. I'm also gonna tell you my solution if you don't wanna deal with any of these things at the end of this video. My name is Curtis Chism. I'm a local real estate agent who moved here from San Diego, California. So if you're looking to relocate here from an area like California, I went through that exact same process, so I know exactly what you're going through, the emotions, the stresses, and what it's like to pick up your whole family and move them to a completely different state. So if you're looking to make the move to Boise, Idaho, all you gotta do is reach out to me via the contact information on the screen below or in the comment section below as well. And I help people all the time, just like you and you and you and you, make the move here to Treasure Valley. I absolutely love it. Reach out anytime, day, nights, or weekends, and we'll schedule a Zoom call to go over the right timeline for helping you make the move here to the Boise, Idaho area. Let's get after these top things you need to know about buying resale homes here in the Treasure Valley. First up is going to be irrigation water rights. That's right, irrigation water rights. If you're coming from a place like California, you're probably not too familiar with this. You're thinking, what, don't I just use the domestic water that comes off my house? No, typically here in the Treasure Valley, you're going to actually have separate irrigation water. Now, some homes won't have irrigation water, and that alone could be a potential red flag for you, because it's gonna cost you a lot more money to irrigate your property. And if you're coming here, maybe you visited before, you've seen videos about the area, you know it's pretty lush and green here. Well, the reason it's lush and green is that there's a lot of irrigation water that occurs because it's actually fairly dry here. It's high desert. We're up 2,500 to 2,700 feet elevation. It's dry, high desert, and we have to water a lot to keep our lawns green. But there's so much water around here coming off the mountains in our reservoirs. There's a huge aquifer here as well. So folks that have wells can tap into that. Lots of water, but we have to put that on the ground to make it nice and lush. So irrigation water rights are super important. So if you don't have irrigation water rights, which does occur, and specifically in areas around Boise and sometimes Meridian as well, it could cost you quite a bit more to water your property. I was talking to one woman who owns a property in Boise, and she's around $400 a month just for water to irrigate her property. Now, if you have irrigation water included, usually it's part of your property taxes, or it might be part of your HOA, it's going to be significantly cheaper. For instance, I'm in Nampa and I pay $160 for the entire year, essentially via my property taxes. It's a separate bill, but it is technically a tax. And I have unlimited irrigation water to water my lawn and anything outdoors. Now, you don't want to drink this water. It comes from the canal. You don't know exactly what's in it. However, it's good for watering. But so $160 for unlimited water for the entire year. That's incredibly cheap, but you could be spending a lot if you don't have that. The other thing you need to know is, how is that water being delivered to your property? Is it being delivered via a pressurized water system? And what that means is that there are well houses around here. Usually each subdivision has one. And that water is being pumped out of a canal. It's being pressurized and then piped to your house and being run through sprinklers, just like you would expect probably what you might have in California if you happen to have a lawn. That's how it typically would work. However, there are a lot of properties that don't have that. They're on a flood system. So what the flood system is that you have to open a big gate valve. You literally pull open a gate valve, and then that runs through some piping and it floods your lawn. You usually have access to this once a week. And you're going to have access based on an assigned day and time, kind of based on when you purchase the house. So anyone that bought before you typically has more senior rights to more preferred days and times. So let me give you a quick example. I have a friend who moved here shortly after me. He bought in Nampa as well. He does not have pressurized irrigation. He's on the flood system, and he didn't know this before he bought the house, but he has to get up once a week at midnight. That is his assigned time, and he has 6 hours that he can flood his lawn. So he has to wake up at midnight. He has to actually drive around his neighborhood to get to the gate valve, open it up. It floods for a period of about 6 hours, and then he goes to work, and his wife heads out, I guess grabs the kids, heads out, and then closes it. But one time he forgot to close it, and it flooded out part of his house. So he said if he had known that before he bought here, he would not have bought that house. He's actually now moving essentially for that main reason. Now, related to irrigation is going to be, we do have poor drainage, poor soil conditions. It's very clay type soil here. So water doesn't really percolate through the ground particularly well. So what can happen is that on your property, you could have a lot of standing water, or that water might want to flood off. And technically in Idaho, it is legally required that you keep water that's on your property within that property and handle it, draining it into the ground itself. Now, some irrigation water runoff is going into the street, not a big deal because it's going to hit the stormwater drain. And typically, a lot of the subdivisions are going to have stormwater retention basins where the water goes into a stormwater retention that slowly percolates back down through a sand layer into the aquifer. However, it's very easy to overwater your grass here. It happens all the time where people just overwater like crazy and then they flood out their properties. So you have to prepare to put in things like dry wells or French drains. These terms are often used interchangeably, and essentially it's a deep pit with a pipe going down it that's perforated with gravel around it so the water can flow into it and then slowly percolate out. The problem is you got to go deep enough down to really hit flowing water. You got to go down probably 10 to 16 feet to hit flowing water for it to work effectively. So you need to plan for that or look for homes that already have that installed. Otherwise, there could be water damage on your property or worse, getting into your crawl space. So now let's touch on the crawl space. That is a thing that happens around here, is water getting into crawl spaces. It happens with resale homes. It also happens with new construction homes. There's actually been a couple big stories recently with a couple builders here in the Treasure Valley, specifically Hubble and Toll Brothers, where news stories have come out. Homeowners are suing those builders or might be suing the builders because of water intrusion issues happening in the crawl spaces. Now, I've talked with one of the representatives of one of those companies, happens to be a warranty guy. I won't put his name on record. However, it sounds like in one particular property, it sounds like they basically dammed up their property with concrete and then overwatered and then flooded out their own crawl space. But that's something for a matter for, I guess, the courts to decide. You need to watch out for that, and that could cause a lot of problems in your crawl space. Very, very expensive, whether that's resale or new construction. You got to look out for that. Actually, I just went down before I made this video into my crawl space just to make sure I didn't have any standing water down there, because I had heard about some water issues around here in my neighborhood. Totally dry, no problem at all. Now, what's really cool is that I have a conditioned crawl space, and this is versus an unconditioned crawl space, where a lot of the builders will use this unconditioned crawl space, and then some are using the conditioned crawl space. Now, what that is an unconditioned crawl space is probably what you might expect to see, where you have vents located around the side of the crawl space in that perimeter wall. That's going to allow airflow to come in. That's going to help dry out any potential moisture that could get in. However, it's also a very wide open point of entry for water to get in if it's coming from the outside. Related to all this, I have to touch on, we do have very high water table here. In fact, in some areas, you're only about 5 feet down and you're going to hit water. In fact, there's areas around here where there's ponds, and really those ponds are simply just dug big pits essentially, and the groundwater came up and created the ponds for some of these luxury communities. Just so you know, those are man-made and it's groundwater that's coming in. Well, that same groundwater can get into your crawl space as well, whether or not you have a conditioned or unconditioned crawl space. The conditioned crawl space doesn't have any vents at all, so that's going to help prevent water from getting in, and it's drawing air in from the house, your conditioned air from your house, from the AC, the heater, and that's being circulated through your crawl space to help keep it dry, help keep water out as well. However, if you have high groundwater, that's going to come in no matter what, so you just got to be on the lookout for that and prepare for that. Now, one drawback to a conditioned crawl space that I've heard is that it is a mechanical ventilation system, meaning that fan runs 24/7. That's pulling that air into the crawl space. Someday that could break. Everything breaks eventually, and you may not know because it's very, very quiet. It's typically in your garage or maybe even the attic where that fan is located. So you got to monitor your crawl space regularly to make sure that nothing's going on. If that fan breaks, there's no airflow any longer, there's any humidity that builds up, now you're going to have a moisture and mold problem. Now, before we leave crawl spaces, we do need to talk about that silent but deadly gas that occurs sometimes, and that's radon. So people don't know about radon if you're coming from a place like California. I didn't know about it really, except that my brother lives in Maryland now, and they have radon there, so he had to deal with it out there. So radon is a silent, odorless, deadly gas that does leach out of the ground in some areas of the Treasure Valley. And what that is, it's coming from uranium that's in the soil, from decomposed granite that is just in the ground, and it does come out in certain areas. However, it's very hit and miss whether or not it's there. So some homes could have it and then others may not in the same exact community. It's just kind of sporadic all over the place. Now, I did not test my home before I moved in myself. However, I had a client recently who bought a home 2 miles from me, tested for radon, and it popped positive for radon. And I'll talk about how to mitigate that. So I did go ahead and test my home, no problem at all. Those conditioned crawl spaces I talked about, those are going to help mitigate your radon gas. However, they're not specifically designed to mitigate radon. So if you do have radon, you need to put in a radon mitigation system. So for that particular home, they had a conditioned crawl space, but that fan was not working for some reason. Once they got it working and it was back on, that actually took care of the radon for the most part, but they did go ahead and still install a radon mitigation system, which is basically an extra layer of visqueen down below moisture barrier and actually vacuuming that radon gas out from underneath that moisture barrier with another fan that runs continuously, and it solved the problem. So you can do these tests, an at-home test for about 25 bucks, or you can have a radon test done professionally through the inspector that I use for a couple $100 and get an actual radon test done. Now, something else to look out for is going to be older roofs here in the Treasure Valley. And we do have a lot of wind, snow, and rain here. So roofs can kind of wear out a little bit faster than what you might be used to if you're coming from a place like California. So you definitely want to make sure we get a roof inspection done. A home inspector will take a look at it first. If they recommend a roof inspection, we'll do that and prepare for maintenance or getting that roof replaced. If you're buying a resale home, you don't want that roof leaking in any way because of course you're going to have potential mold problems in the house. Now, along with older roofs, all that weather we get here, siding can wear out, especially if it's in contact with the ground. You can have dry rot. Again, so mold can occur. So these are things you really want to look out for, especially in older homes. But even in new construction homes, you still need to look out for that because what can happen is when they're building these homes, it could rain and they could close up a home too fast and you might have mold, especially in the crawl spaces. Often where I do find it, I even had mold in my own crawl space when I bought my house. I've had several clients have mold in their crawl spaces in brand new construction homes. The builder immediately takes care of it, is very easily remediated, and they often provide extended warranties on that to make sure that there's no problem. So very treatable, just something you got to watch out for. Now, something you can do to help solve some of these moisture and mold problems, whether it's in the attic from maybe an older roof potentially, or in the crawl space where you have potential moisture coming in, you can use what's called a spray foam insulation, and you actually spray the entire roof structure. You seal up all the vents. Surprisingly, normally you have to vent to allow it to breathe to get moisture out, but you're actually, with a spray foam insulation, you're actually keeping moisture out. It's a waterproof membrane that goes on there. And you do the same thing in the crawl space, and that's going to help prevent any moisture from getting in. And if it does, it's going to help prevent mold from growing as well. So spray foam insulation on an older home, or even on a new construction home you're looking to get high energy efficiency out of, then that could be a great way to go to solve that problem. And if you want to know more about spray foam insulation, just hit me up. I can give you some resources about that. Now, here's a big one that you need to look out for, and that is going to be older plumbing, and specifically polybutylene piping that was used pretty predominantly here in the Valley, especially in the 1990s, but also going into the 1980s and potentially a little bit in the 1970s as well. But it's a very cheap material that was used, again, in the 1990s. Now, it was essentially banned or discontinued in the late 90s, but it was very cheap. But there were a lot of builders that used that, especially in the mid-90s as it was being phased out because the manufacturers are unloading it super, super cheap. However, unfortunately, it has a lot of problems, and there's chemical reactions that can occur between elements in the water and the piping, and especially around turns in the pipe. That's where it wears out in particular. And then you have pipe bursts that occur in the home. It could be under a slab, it could be in the walls. So you really got to look out for that, especially, like I said, homes built in the 1990s in particular, and make sure that if they have that it's already been remediated and completely repiped, or you got a plan to repipe that yourself at some point, or factor that into your offer to not offer quite as much because you're gonna have to repipe. And repiping ranges around $8,000 to $15,000 or more, depending on the size of the home. So that's a big thing to look out for. And then of course, just other general plumbing issues, whether or not there's polybutylene, looking for water supply lines, if they're getting corroded, your main sewer lines, making sure those are cleared out, no roots in there, no things stuffed in there, and just general plumbing inspection to make sure your lines are all good. You're also gonna wanna take a look at your HVAC systems, your AC and your furnace in particular, because if you're buying an older home, you wanna make sure that that AC and furnace and water heater are 10, 15, 20 years old. Now, a water heater, that's about the useful life, 10 years, so that should be replaced right around there. Furnaces, generally, if they're maintained well, can certainly go longer, 15 to 20 years. Same with ACs, but around 20 years, those are definitely pretty much needing to get replaced at that point. So if you're buying an older home that has original equipment, again, you need a budget for replacing that equipment, or again, plan your offer accordingly to make up for that cost. But it does get very cold here in the Treasure Valley. You do not want a furnace going out on you in the middle of the winter. So you definitely want to make sure that's maintained, or that it's brand new and maintained properly as well. Now, older electrical systems is another issue to look out for. Now, homes that are built, in the 90s, 2000s, it's probably going to be okay, but still, of course, you want to get that inspected. But if you're moving here and you're buying a much older home that was built here in Boise, like say the North End, West End, some of these older Craftsman Victorian homes, they might have very old wiring. They might have old knob and tube wiring that really needs to be upgraded. It's a big fire hazard at this point. You want to plan accordingly for upgrading that. Now, some of these homes that are older, they're not going to be insulated properly here in the Treasure Valley. And this isn't just the old Craftsman Victorian homes. Certainly those are not going to be insulated properly unless someone's already done it. But even homes built in the 1970s, 1980s, 1990s, and even now early 2000s, because insulation does wear out eventually. potentially. So you want to keep an eye on that, make sure that the bat levels in the attic are good, under the crawl space are good, and maybe even the walls at some point, especially those older homes, if they even have insulation at all. You got to make sure if you're buying an older home, really look out for that. Again, that spray foam insulation would be a great remedy. You can actually go into the walls and fill up voids and re-insulate walls without having to open them up completely. Another great option for that to solve that problem. Now, the other thing to look out for is septic systems and wells. If you're coming from California and you live in a subdivision, you're coming out here and you're looking to buy some land, you want an acre, 2 acres, 5 acres, most likely you're going to end up on a septic system and a well potentially. And a lot of people want that. You just need to know what that is. So essentially what it is that you have a huge tank in the ground. So all the waste product from the home goes into the septic system, the solids settle out there, and then the liquids go out through a leach field and leach lines. So you have to plan for that. You might see a field and go, oh, I can build on that field, but you may not be able to because the leach lines may be in there from the septic system. You can't build on that field. You have to leave that open. Now, the other thing, of course, is a well. Wells are great. It makes you more self-sufficient. However, it's gonna be powered. So if power ever goes out, you wanna make sure you have a generator backup on that well system in your home, of course. Otherwise, you're gonna be out of water. I was just touring a 10-acre homestead property. She has a generator as a power backup. However, she's concerned, like, what if power goes down for a long time? Propane eventually runs out. And that's the other thing, you're probably gonna be on a propane system in addition to well and septic if you're on a rural property. But yeah, propane eventually runs out. So what happens then? She has all these animals she has to take care of. So she had to put on a hand pump system on the well as an emergency backup to hand pump water out of her well to continue to supply water to her animals and of course herself, because animals consume so much water, gallons and gallons a day per animal. Now, of course, I mentioned, okay, how do you solve these problems? Well, first off, hire an inspector, hire myself or another qualified real estate agent to help guide you through these things, to guide you through what to expect when buying a home. These homes are not gonna be perfect. There are gonna be problems in every single home, especially resale, and even sometimes in new construction as well. So hire an experienced real estate agent, hire an inspector who I can recommend a great inspector to you as well. Now, of course, the other option that a lot of my clients end up choosing when they're moving here to the Treasure Valley is buying a new construction home. Again, this does not solve all the problems. I already referenced some of the problems you're gonna come across that are related to both resale and new construction, and they can have their own sets of issues as well. But a lot of these deferred maintenance type problems that I talked about just simply go away with new construction homes. Again, my name is Curtis Chism. I can help you with any of this, whether it's resale or new construction homes, especially if you're moving and relocating here to the Treasure Valley. I would love to help you out. All you gotta do is reach out via phone, text, or email. Again, we'll set up that Zoom call and we'll figure out a timeline that works best for you. Whether you're 9 days, 90 days, or even 2 years out, go ahead and reach out. Let's get the ball rolling. If you are looking to explore more about the Treasure Valley and you want to dive in deeper, all you gotta do is watch this video right here where we dive in deeper, and I'll see you on that next video.